There we go.
Hello, everyone. I am Charlie Tolhurst, and welcome to the Globetrotter Newscast for today. And today, of course, is the 22nd of February. Yes, you know I'm wearing headphones because I am actually in a studio. The 22nd of February, a huge day, the day we've all been waiting for a long time. Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom announcing a roadmap out of the COVID-19 lockdown. And I'm joined by Labour supporter Zach Chambers today to round up all the news. Hello, Zach.
Hi.
Now, Zach, I have a document here of what the Prime Minister said earlier on in the House of Commons. The list is massive in terms of how long this roadmap is. It is 4 steps. It is a gradual lockdown. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, calling it cautious, but also irreversible as well. Could you explain to listeners exactly what kind of measures were announced in the House of Commons earlier today?
Yes, hi, Charlie. Yes, so this is going to take me a little while because there's a lot to say, Charlie. I have to say that there's a lot to say on this. So yes, we got our announcement today, Charlie, from the Prime Minister House himself. He just held a news conference just a couple of minutes ago, and obviously he first announced it to the Commons at 3:30 today. There's a lot in here, Charlie. This is going to take a lot of time to me to get through. So obviously be patient. So this all starts on the 8th of March, where because of the situation where we are in now, we are able to start lifting restrictions, which is, I suppose, good news if you're a freedom-loving person and wants to, get away from restrictions. Although, and you can kind of be excited actually because there is now kind of a limit when we're supposed to get back to normal. But I'll get back into that in a minute. So this starts on the 8th, Charlie, and you'll probably know as a student for yourself by now, Charlie. It all starts 8th of March when all educational settings, except some of them, but schools
Except
and
universities.
Colleges, except universities, are going to be open for students. Now, some areas, and I was just going through here the document, Charlie. Some areas, higher education courses, so some in universities that are practical and can't do via Zoom, will also reopen on the 8th of March. That can be done as well. Not all. Some of it will still be done via Zoom when possible, but those who can't do it practically via Zoom call can do it in person from the 8th of March. So some universities can gradually start opening up. Social contact on the 8th of March, Charlie. Exercise and recreation outdoors will now be allowed with one other person for the 8th of March. This is stage 1, by the way. But there'll still be a ban of indoor, obviously mixing. There will now be care, including for children, including sport for children. So after school clubs, preschool clubs can reopen, can be done again. Obviously, there's still the legal stay-at-home requirement with the 30 funerals and the 6 weddings and wakes. No holidays, no travel. There's still the stay-at-home order. Now, this is part 1, Charlie, because stage 1 is done in 2 parts, and the second part is on the 29th, where the rule of 6 returns, Charlie. Do you remember the famous rule of 6 we've all been used to? I
do remember that rule very, very well. I really do. I remember that last year when the government brought that in September. Rule of 6 was implemented in restaurants, indoors and outdoors. And of course, there were fines for people who failed to comply with the rule of 6. That's returning, but in a very different way from the 29th of March. You can either gather outside in a group of 6 or 2 households from the 29th.
Yes, and that's outdoors only on the 29th. Now, there's also some more liftings in stage 1. You can organise outdoor sport for children will be allowed. There's be children and adults. And outdoor sports and leisure facilities, such as, say, outdoor gyms, for example, in parks will be allowed. All outdoor children's activities, outdoor parent and child groups can be up to 15 parents will also be allowed. The usual minimal travel and the stay-at-home orders will actually end on the 29th of March, Charlie. the legal requirement to stay at home, although you will be advised to work from home whenever possible, and you're advised to minimize travel. That's the requirement from the 29th of March. And then there'll be about 5 weeks, Charlie, before we get to stage 2. Now, I should point out, that the Prime Minister can delay stages. For example, if he decides that stage 2 needs to be delayed, then it will affect the other stages after that, because this will be in a 5-week, period where we're going to move up in stages, and that will start on the no earlier than the 12th of April. I should point out, I'll use the words here, no earlier, which means that it will not start before a certain date. And there's some pretty fundamental changes in that, Charlie, I have to say.
Yeah, I will address. I'll address stage 2, Zach, whilst we're here, because there's a lot to get through.
Yeah.
So stage 2 restrictions I have in here. So for the next stage, which is in stage 2, gyms no earlier than the 12th of April, just to confirm. Gyms will be allowed to reopen under stage 2. Theme parks will also be allowed to reopen. For example, Chessington World Adventures and Alton Towers are a couple of examples. Also, they plan to not open non-essential retail, which is shops such as clothing shops and electronic stores. That is also in stage 2. Outdoor hospitality will be allowed to reopen, which includes pubs and restaurants that can serve outside. They won't be allowed to serve inside. Of course, there will be no Scotch egg debate with the substantial meal, because they won't be required to have a substantial meal in place. So that is going to be out. And also hairdressing are reopen on that date as well. So that is stage 2, no earlier than the 12th of April. And that will be down to, again, the infection rate, whether that is lowering, and the vaccination program will be, if that is also continuing to be a success as well. 4 tests have to be carried out before that can be eased. Then we go on to step 3. And Zach, you can take this one for no earlier than the 17th of May.
Yes, just to add as well, Charlie, to step 2 as well, and I'm just reading this. The weddings, wakes, and receptions will increase from 6 to 15. Also, as well, there's going to be some the pilot events are also going to return as well. And you're allowed domestic overnight stays, but no international holidays quite yet in stage 2. But that's coming up to stage 3. There is a change where you're allowed to, in terms of social contacting, where you're allowed to maximum, it becomes 30 people outdoors. The rule of 6 is scrapped outdoors. However, the rule of 6 will apply where you'll be allowed to visit indoors, but that will be subject to the rule of 6 or 2 households. Now, I should stress, Charlie, this says here on the document, subject to review, which means the rule of 6 indoors may not make step 3. This is no earlier than 17th of May. Indoor hospitality, entertainment, and attractions, so that will be the pubs, bars, and restaurants indoors, will be allowed to open. The remaining accommodation. Outdoor entertainment, including performances, are also allowed to continue. Also, interestingly as well, Charlie, subject to review, potentially international travel to some countries. That's significant, which means they're probably likely that you would get a summer holiday abroad, which will please a lot of people. Life events will increase to 30. There will also be capacity for 1,000 people in indoor events. Outdoor seated events will be 25% capacity or 10,000. And outdoor other events will be 4,000 or 50%. So that's stuff like the football will be allowed 10,000, Charlie, which is a big old crowd in that there as well. And it all leads to, hopefully, if it all goes well, to stage 4, Charlie, which is no earlier than the 21st of June.
And this one's an interesting one.
Reopening.
And Zach, I have the stage 4 restrictions up here. I'm just going to go over them now. Sophie Ridge just tweeted this. At least 5 weeks after step 3, no earlier than the 21st of June, by step 4, the government hopes to introduce the following, subject to review: no legal limits on social contact. Nightclubs should be allowed to reopen subject to COVID-19 lateral flow testing. Larger events could be permitted, and there could be no legal limit on all events, but that, of course, is subject to review. So we are months ahead look really promising. Obviously, the latest figures, I am going to read them. I think about 10,000 new cases and 178 further deaths have been registered. So figures definitely on the weekend looking a lot better. And certainly the vaccine rollout, Zach, really going in the right direction now for the government.
Yes, we had a slight. Only thing is, we had a slight stall today. It was only 115,000 doses come out in England today, which is slightly worrying. Hopefully, this is just a one-day thing where this happens. But yes, this vaccination program is the reason why we're actually lifting with these restrictions. To be fair, Charlie, and as well, and hopefully it will pick up a much bigger pace than that. To think about it, having freedoms now by the 21st of June is quite incredible. Now, interestingly, Charlie, I just want to point out as well, there will still be things that still could be limits, Charlie, and this is these are some areas under review.
Right,
example,
so we just have got some.
Yeah.
Sorry, Zach. We've got some technical issues.
Oh, sorry. I do apologise, Charlie. Hope you're right your end. Hope it's working everything. So yeah. So on the step 4, I just point out as well. I know it says as well that what should I say? I forgot what I said now. But step 4. I think this is all subject to the social distancing situation, Charlie, as well, because looking at it, we may still end up having social distancing by then. We may still have the 1 meter rule or 2 meter rule in as well. That could still be subject to change there. So, and obviously Patrick Vance was going over this in the press conference as well. That face coverings may still be required going into next year, Charlie, which would be very interesting. Not a lot of people will be fun of that. But yeah, that may well still be a requirement, Charlie. Oh, there we go. He's back. I think, yeah. So yeah. So we may still be under social distancing rules. We may still be under, 2 meter rules, depending on how this review goes into social distancing. Or not. So yeah, this will be very interesting to see. Even if we do even get to stage 4 of the lifting of restrictions, I have to say, it's slightly ambitious, considering the fact that the government want all adults over 18 to have been vaccinated by the end of July. Whether that's going to be done or not is going to be very interesting to see. I think on that end.
It's an interesting one.
So yeah, I think that's where we are at the moment.
Yeah, sorry, Zach, whilst you were speaking there, I had some technical difficulties, so I'm sure the listeners...
Oh, that's all right.
...struggling to understand what was going on, what was being said there. So, in other words, masks could be worn...
don't worry. I feel the gap very well.
That's fine. I mean, sure the listeners have caught up with what we're saying there. So, basically, masks will probably be in place for a long time as well. Obviously, step 4, as I mentioned earlier, that will be...
Is he alive? Oh dear. Is he alive again? I think he's having problems at his end. He's having problems at his end, isn't he? He's frozen, poor lad. Oh, bless him. I think he's frozen. Yeah, I can't hear a thing on his. Oh, he's gone. Wow. Yeah, he went. I'm going to text him. I think you're having. Wow, he's having issues, the lad. I think. Yeah. I think you're having issues. Well, mine works. I think. Yeah. I think he's still alive. Right. Okay. So let's just go through the rest of them because I think whilst he's doing well. So yeah, that's interesting actually. Born earlier the 21st. Domestic chat overnight. No legal limits. I mean, it's interesting because I think it's interesting because I don't know whether this would be even possible or not to do it because you're in the vaccine program. And if you think of nightclubs, that I think it'd be hard because he's come back alive again. Are you back alive again, Charlie?
Yes,
I can't, yeah.
Yeah, sorry about that, everyone. I had technical issues, so I've had to move on to another laptop whilst I'm here. But I am here. So yes, Zach. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, obviously the 17 million people that have been vaccinated and the masks 2022 could be being worn, as Patrick Vallance mentioned. So there's a lot on this issue at the moment.
Yeah.
What do you make about schools with the new restrictions? Because there's been new restrictions in schools, like we've heard to the Prime Minister today, Boris Johnson, saying secondary students will be tested every twice a week. Masks are going to be updated as well. What do you make of that?
Well, it's interesting because I think what I've read for the plan is that once you go back, is that you'll take your first test or so at college, and then you'll be given home testing for the rest of your thing. I think that's a more practical way to do it. I think that's better. I think that does less stress in terms of how this is going to work. Because if we talk about the way it was originally going to work, that everyone's going to test it at school, and you're going to deploy thousands of people out to go and bring you the test every day, every week, and I thought that was a bit problematic. So the fact they've slimmed this down a little bit, Charlie, to say they're going to do this do this at home rather than doing it in person at school where I'm deploying thousands of people, which probably wouldn't be practical. I think it's better because you're going to use these lateral flow tests as well. Which are quicker, may not be as reliable, but they at least give you good indication. So I think that's better. What they're planning is actually much better in terms of what's being proposed, what's happening with that. I think that's practical as well. Obviously, there's been a bit of skepticism of how this is going to push the R number as well, Charlie. Now, Patrick Vallance dismissed Chris Whitty completely dismissed the report today by, I think it was The Guardian, suggesting that he wasn't happy with everyone going back in one. But he seems to be okay with it now. And he completely dismissed The Guardian's report on that. Now, I think the Prime Minister even said today that he wasn't bothered with the ARG rate going on. In fact, it could be countered by the vaccine. So, yes, interesting to see that. And I think it's good, actually, we're bringing in the test to school as well. I think they're needed. I think it's good to control the virus as well. So this testing is going to be extremely important. Home testing. It might mean you having to wake up in the middle of the day or something. I don't know what time of day you actually have to take these tests. I know it means you have to take it in the middle of the day, after school, during the middle of the day, or something like that, or before every morning. I don't know what time you do that, but
it's confusing.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing my end. Looking what the paper says, Charlie. I'm very interested to see what it says at school as well, because I'm very interested to see how this works for testing.
This is going to be, it's going to be interesting, Zach, because they've mentioned in the document that was sent through from the Department of Health, Department for Education, that the testing is going to take place at least twice a week, and it is confusing. I mean, I've had teaching unions raising this point up, saying that the issue with the testing could be logistical for schools. You're testing so many children twice a week with the lateral flow test, which we know they're not the most accurate, according to many journalists and people. It's difficult, isn't it, Zach? And do you think the lateral flow tests are going to work in schools? Do you think schools will be able to test students, unlike what they've done in January?
Well, I don't even know if we saw firm dates about universities in there. I know we talked, there was some dates in there, Charlie, about some practical, education courses that couldn't be done from somewhere like, Zoom calls, which is probably not possible, so that they could start sending universities back then. I didn't see any firm commitment about rest of universities, which I thought was very interesting, in there as well. But yeah, universities, they got to be careful with that because it's going to be. I just think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that, because I think there's still more to be announced. I have a feeling it will be in stage 2, Charlie. I have a feeling it's going to be in stage 2, but I think there still needs to be more clarification over that. I think
there it does, Zach, and obviously stage 2 is going to start no earlier than the 12th of April, if all goes well. You're going to be looking at reopening gyms. You've got the reopening of non-essential retail, hairdressers, and obviously theme parks like Alton Towers and Chester, as I mentioned earlier. This is really important because some of these areas are close contact services, and obviously the schools issue is a big one that a lot of people are concerned it could push the R rate up, stuff like that. But I think the vaccine, if all goes well, and we've got the Moderna one coming on board very soon in a couple of weeks' time, I think it's next week. I'm not sure when the Moderna one's going to be on.
I'm not quite sure on that one. Yeah.
I mean, Moderna is coming in the spring. So the hope is that once we get more vaccine in and more supply, we should really be able to start ramping those numbers up. 17.7 million now, the official figure, I think. So we could really go higher than that. We could really start accelerating the vaccine rollout. And Zach, what would you make if the vaccine rollout here was greatly accelerated? Do you think the PM's pledge to vaccinate all adults by the end of July is achievable?
I think it certainly is achievable, Charlie. I certainly think so. We've also got another Novavax as well. We've got a vaccine as well, I think, in the making, that I think that's due to come out soon as well. And I think we've ordered quite a lot of that as well in the UK. So I think, that will also be crucial, Charlie, to making sure that, there is more people getting vaccinated, being put in arms. So yeah, I think it's very, very much possible. I'm a bit worried about today's pace of vaccine injections into arms, obviously because only 115,000. I think there was a one-off potentially. I think there was clearly some problems. I know whether it's a lag from the snow week we had a few weeks ago, where there's a bit of a lag or not. So I just wonder whether this is a one-off. But I think we will definitely see that increase in vaccination, no doubt about that, as well. So yeah, I think we are certainly on the right pace, and I think it's very much possible that everyone over 18 could be vaccinated by July.
This would be a brilliant step if we can get all this country, because remember that this is 52 million or something. It's over 50 million adults in this country. You've got to go at sheer pace to get all of these adults vaccinated, because you've got some people who've got to have their second doses. You've got, of course, the people who were vaccinated in January. They're going to have their second doses very soon. So vaccine supply is a critical thing. So I am confident the government can achieve that target. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see where we're going to be going. But moving on, Zach, from the lockdown announcement, there has been some news about Texas with the weather, and Joe Biden the other day declared an emergency in Texas. Could you explain to listeners exactly what was happening in Texas with the weather?
Yeah. So basically, what happened in Texas was there was a massive snowstorm there, and the whole place just froze over. The energy grid failed pretty much, which means most people were left without some power. The days without power. Worst of all, Charlie, there were even shortages in water, which meant some people had to boil their ice which is not pleasant, considering all the bacteria that could have as well. There was also, as well, so what happened there, Charlie, was that Joe Biden declared a federal emergency, gave federal emergency aid to Texas just so they could recover, quickly recover from that, basically the freeze over and electricity, which has been horribly happened there. There was also a scandal, Charlie, involving one particular politician there as well, one elected senator, Senator Ted Cruz, who honestly, I have to say, come out the worst person out of this, who decided on the Saturday of the big freeze that rather than being stuck in the freeze, he would travel off to Mexico for a holiday on the weekend. I mean, with particularly horrific timing about this and leaving all his constituency behind just to freeze, suffer. And he was widely condemned, Charlie, for even taking a holiday. He admitted himself it was a mistake. Looked like it was pre-planned. He decided to fib about it in one of his interviews, saying that he was only going there for a day because the kids wanted to, but no, it was pre-planned, thanks to the New York Times messages. So he looked like a complete tool himself. But yes, Joe Biden very quick to deliver aid, and there's still a lot of work there to be done. There's going to be a big investigation to discover what happened with why the power broke out. But it's interesting to Charlie as well, because Texas requires their own aid. Texas uses their own power rather than sharing power. Yeah, Texas, they use their own power energy grids rather than sharing it with other areas of the US. And this is so that they can avoid basically regulation. And it just proves today that they need regulation, because honestly, if you have a power grid that fails like that, then you've certainly got a problem with your regulation that you're not even using it. So yes, there's a lot of problems Texas their end. Politicians are quick to blame the Green New Deal, which is complete bonkers and utter nonsense. But yeah, so a lot of problems in Texas this week with a big snowstorm that's just affecting millions of people. Good to see some politicians though taking their responsibility seriously. One politician has raised $5 million for Texas, dollars for Texas, just so they can help the community. And there's been a lot of phone bank calling as well, just to check everyone's okay. So there has been a community spirit for those who wanted that spirit, not for those who flying off to a holiday in Mexico and not caring again. So yeah, there's been a lot of spirit, a lot of care, a lot of love for the people out there in Texas.
Horrible. I can't say that the snowstorms out there have been horrible, and I feel so sorry for everyone who's dealing with such a difficult time with a lack of water, a lack of power. It's a huge issue, and I think people right now will have to really just, in general, it's a huge event. And I mean, to think about it as well, with this issue of with a lack of water, these people, remember, it's freezing cold out there in Texas. People are not going to have any running water at all. And that can be a massive issue in terms of like keeping warm. Obviously, as you've seen, Joe Biden's had to step in. And Zach, what do you make of his intervention here?
Well, it's necessary. And actually, can I just say, Charlie, people have actually died because they've immune carbon monoxide. They've literally immune that into their system, and it's killed them. And there's honestly, obviously, the thoughts of those people as well who no fault of them have managed to suffer throughout that. But yes, the response from Joe Biden has been quick and very swift from his standpoint. He obviously getting disaster rate there as well. Obviously, he's been in contact with the governor, Greg Abbott, who's perhaps not come out of this very well either, I have to say. But at least he's had that conversation with him. So he has been quick, and he has been assisting the people quite well there, and keeping them in their needs and wants.
It's good to see that the governor of Texas is getting out there, and it's a big issue, isn't it? You have to think that flooding, that's not a snowstorm. This is worse. This is a lot different to a hurricane. Like a hurricane, we've seen them in America last year. Hurricane Harvey, Texas got battered with a few years ago. Now they've got a snowstorm. It's crazy. And I honestly, on whoever has lost their life out there, it's horrible. It's a horrendous thing. And my thoughts and prayers are with all those who have lost their lives during this snowstorm. But Zach, now moving on to Boeing. Interesting news from Boeing today of announcing that all of their 777s are going to be stopped flying. And this comes after quite a horrendous incident for one of its planes. What do you make of this?
Wow, yes, this is quite this was quite a wow story, you know, the one that you've got to be shocked about. So what happened, Charlie, this happened in Colorado with one of their Boeing 377s, is that the engine failed on one of their planes. And now, thankfully, can I just say as well, all people were fine, off safe, and there was no injuries reported there. But one area, there was this huge bit of debris, Charlie, that fell off the plane, and it landed on someone's home. Literally, there was a huge bit of debris that landed on someone's home. I thankfully no one's been injured there either as well, Charlie. And I just have to say I'm relieved about that. Thank goodness for their safety. But yes, it was quite a shocking, rather wow story that, you know, it surprised me, and it was, you know, think, how did that happen? So they the Boeing 0377 is out. The plane has also been suspended from use for here in the UK as well. It's not allowed to travel into our airspace either. A decision made by Grant Shapps, but they've suspended the plane as well. The engine that blew up in that has the engine that blew up in each of those planes. So I have to say that was a disaster well avoided. And that could have been even much worse, Charlie, from what we saw, because that was really, really bad. And that could have been worse, a lot worse. It, you know, if that debris landed on someone, that could have killed someone. But I'm glad it didn't, because that was the last thing we needed, someone killed from flying debris.
I know, Zach, horrible, horrendous to see that. And obviously as well, all the 777s, that includes many planes in this country, from many airlines, like obviously EasyJet, stuff like that. If you don't know what the Boeing 777 is, just have a look right now, and I'm going to show you quickly what this plane is. It is a plane that is capable of flying to multiple destinations across the world. And yeah, unfortunately in Colorado, we've had a horrendous engine that's failed on a Boeing 777. And yeah, it is absolutely wrecked. It's horrible. I can't imagine. I mean, Zach, this is one of the biggest tragedies to one of the biggest air crashes I've seen in years. It's really crazy. There was one actually, I think, last year.
Yeah, I was going to say, Charlie, the plane didn't crash, thankfully. Its engine just fell off, and it managed to emergency land quite safely. I have to say, it could have been worse. It's just a shocking story to read, Charlie. It's not that in any other story about it, this would have been, you know, it would have been on the news for like 2 minutes, and you would have never heard about it again. The reason why we're hearing it lots and lots and lots, because it fell on because this debris fell on people's homes, and it's something that rarely happens. It's just a shock and surprise out of it. So yeah, that's why it's been covered so much, because of the debris landing on people's homes. I mean, goodness me, I know some people need roof repairs. That's not the way how to get roof repairs from falling off debris. I mean, I think you need another DIY company to do that sort of thing, not a flying piece of debris, Charlie. But everyone's okay, thankfully. That's the main thing.
Yeah, it was a horrible crash. Horrible, especially to see its engine fall off. I mean, the worst crash I can think of was it when an airline in Pakistan actually crashed and about 100 people died. Well, if I remember, it was a horrendous crash.
Somewhere around there.
It was horrendous, and I just sort of watched that, and I thought, like, this could have been so much worse. And if it was a 777 that crashed, I mean, you've got a massive airline there that could have potentially could have gone extinct. It would have been horrendous. Now we're going to move on, Zach, before we finish with Boris's announcement on the lockdown. The cladding crisis has been an issue that many politicians in this country have been debating. Robert Jenrick was in the House of Commons earlier today chatting about this issue. And according to an article here from the BBC, it says Grenfell cladding use accident waiting to happen is a tagline or a headline that the BBC used. What do you make of the cladding crisis so far at the moment?
Well, this is an issue that's gone on for years now, Charlie, since that tower incident that happened. And it still's not been sorted, let's just say that. Last week, I think it was last week, we got an announcement from the government saying that they're going to invest about 4 or 5 billion in trying to remove unsafe cladding, but with towers that was certain height. Now, there were also announcements of grants and loans for those with a lower towers that did have cladding, but they were at a lower height. I have to say, this has not exactly gone down well for people who are in lower height claddings. And the big issue with this, Charlie, is that this raises people's cost, because people do lease or rent out these buildings if they need to live in something, and these claddings, okay, they because of the equipment they use, it leaves people in completely unthinkable amount of costs and debt, because the amount to repair is so high and so ridiculous. It just leaves people bankrupt or out of money. And to see loans given out I don't think is good enough for those who are with the lowest height. But I mean, I'm glad those with higher heights are now being given investment. But it's just not good enough, I think, Charlie, for those with the lower height, living in lower height cladding. If you're renting out, it's just not affordable, and loans are not going to be good enough, because you're still going to have to pay it off, and you don't get that, you don't get that protection as those if you're living in high cladding. So it's not good enough, Charlie, for those who are living in lower cladding buildings. It's not good enough. They need to be treated the same as those in higher cladding. They all need to be treated the same, no matter how much investment this is. They need to be treated the same. I just feel like this is unfair, kind of discriminatory policies that deal with the issue one way, but completely miss the issue the other way.
We've seen it, Zach, in the Grenfell Tower. Literally all the cladding was destroyed from the fire, and they're having to completely restructure that building. And I think a lot more cladding is needed if that building is going to ever survive. If you think about it, it's had lots of wear from that fire, and it needs strengthening. And the government have got to get on top of this issue. Robert Jenrick, the community secretary, the housing minister, he's got to invest a lot more in this. I'd also argue his housing minister as well. I think his name's someone Hill. I'm not entirely sure of his name, but the housing minister and the housing secretary, Robert Jenrick, have got to come up with a credible solution to fix this cladding crisis, because Keir Starmer mentioned about it the other week. People living in homes are having to pay higher incomes. It is just horrible. It is a horrible thing. I really think this could be a massive issue in years to come.
Yeah,
for sure. So fine, we're going to move on now. Penultimate thing of the podcast. Of course, I am live here on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook with the Globetrotter Newscast. If you have any comments, please drop them down below. We'd love to hear your questions and answers about what has been announced today. But Zach, Formula One now, lots of car launches to talk about. Alfa Romeo launching their car today, but last week McLaren launched their car, and so did AlphaTauri. What did you make of the first two car launches?
Well, I have to say, McLaren one, I was a bit let down, really, to be fair, and I'll tell you why. I was expecting something a bit radical, because we launched a 40-minute show, Charlie. We watched a 40-minute show last week, and we saw some really cringe features. Obviously, we had interviews with Lando and Daniel, which is obviously nice. I mean, they had great personalities. I just wish they didn't force the personalities on them. And we waited 30 minutes to see a car reveal with a car that looks exactly the same. So we wasted all that time and show just to have a car that looks the same. Trust me, the car looks nice. I mean, it looks good as it is. I just wish they didn't hype up a show that had the same looking car in it. I mean, I have to say, though, the AlphaTauri car has had a new look. That looks very good, Charlie. I think it looks really nice, actually. suits well for this year. And we've had the Alfa Romeo reveal this morning as well, and that car looks very nice, Charlie. There's nice little changes there in terms of the looks of it. Now, obviously, Alfa Romeo needing an improvement this year, I think, Charlie, considering the fact they didn't do quite as well. I think what they've looked from what they've said today in the media interviews is that they can recover some of the power deficit in this year's Alfa Romeo. Hopefully, they've had a bit of work done to it. They've put a new power unit into it, and they think actually they can get to some in talks of they can claw back so that they can gain into some where Mercedes power is at the moment. And I think the Ferrari collaborations hopefully is working in trying to find improvements of it. But they need improvement this year, Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
They've got an unchanged lineup, obviously with Raikkonen and Giovinazzi. They finished P8 in the championship, so that's where they need to improve, Charlie, in terms of trying to get up the midfield. Hopefully, with the power unit change, this could work. Hopefully, it may have an issues because obviously this is a complete new power unit, but hopefully it doesn't because they're going to need the power. They need to move up to midfield and change some of the other teams this year.
And Zach as well, with Alfa Romeo, especially with their lineup. Robert Kubica is, of course, their reserve driver. Alfa Romeo have got to show great pace this year on some more technical circuits. I mean, they've done well at Imola, got a double points finish. But when you look at the Portuguese Grand Prix at the Algarve, Raikkonen had such a fantastic start that later in the race, he just fell right down the order. He didn't have the pace. And it's a shame because that car, whilst it had potential, the Ferrari engine just didn't have the pace last year, and it was the same with the Haas. It just let them down, didn't it?
I mean, you also got to factor in race. You obviously got to factor in race strategy as well, Charlie. Not all of it's down to the engine. The Ferrari engine was pretty poor last year in some places, especially on the main Ferrari car. But obviously, strategy and pace distancing, maintaining your tyres also going to be a factor. Now, obviously, the tyres are going to change slightly this year as well, so that would be something to play with as well. Oh, excuse me. But I think what Alfa Romeo identifies as a struggle is definitely that Ferrari power unit, and I think they want to go a bit quicker. So they're obviously improving that. That's where they think they need to best where they can find some improvement out. That's where they find it as well. So yeah, that's where they're going to find it as well. Whether they can overcome their rivals is another thing. I'm not sure whether whether they could. Hopefully, with a power boost, it could work. It needs to work. I think as well, Charlie. They need to get going. With that,
and also as well as that more car launches. Sorry, coming up this week. Launching, of course, tomorrow is Red Bull, I believe, and also. I think Wednesday another team will be unveiling their car as well. What do you make? Red Bull launching their new car. Do you expect them to be at Silverstone tomorrow doing the shakedown? Maybe.
I hope so. I think they're obviously going to be driving their car. Going to showcase some. They want to showcase some of their footage of their new car. This is a big year for Red Bull because this is their final year of the Honda power unit in with it. Obviously, they're going to have an engine freeze, and they can use some of the components of the Honda engine from 2022 to build their own engine. But yes, they're going to try and eke out some of their Red Bull power, that Honda power unit for their final year as full working partners. And it's going to be very useful to see whether they can gain slightly on Mercedes. Now, I don't know whether they're going to actually be able to claim all that pace back. We don't know. I mean, the faster circuits, you think Mercedes will be at an advantage potentially for some of the high-speed circuits. It would depend on the conditions of where they are. But Honda Red Bull want to claw some of that power back with Honda as well, and reduce some of the possible the inconsistency for some of the possible issues that I have with the engine as well and power unit. Because sometimes it can be a little bit inconsistent. That engine, as good as power as it is, they still need to remedy some of the technical stuff that could happen as well. So I'll be interested to see whether they can get close to Mercedes or not, whether there's just no room to get the power. Now, I just wonder, it's going to be a bit difficult in 2022 onwards to really squeeze out any more of that power, because they're going to be using their own engine from onwards, even though they're going to be using technical parts from Honda. But yeah, I think this is the last main year for Red Bull to eke out that power before we move to completely different cars from 2022.
Yeah, and also, as well, Zach, the lineup for Red Bull is Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez joining Red Bull. What do you think he's going to have to achieve? Because obviously Perez goes up against the likes of Max Verstappen, a very strong driver. Does Perez have to start well, and does he have to start strongly?
I think he needs to go. He's obviously on a 1-year deal, Charlie. He's on a 1-year deal, so he's going to have to start very strongly. He's going to have to get in the rhythm. Now, especially in the car that was slower than what Max Verstappen had, it's going to be difficult for Perez. But I think he's got plenty of experience, and actually, I think he can ease into the Red Bull much easier than, say, a rookie would, like Albon or Gasly did, because they struggled so much because they didn't have enough experience. They got put into there. So I think, actually, Charlie, I think he'll start off all right, actually, because he has the experience. He knows he's driven the Racing Point, which now knows Aston Martin, for many years now, and I think he'll ease into that Red Bull, hopefully, and hopefully he can showcase his true talents in that car.
Yeah, let's hope so. Perez has he won the Sakir Grand Prix last year. He's a strong driver. I just hope that Perez can really challenge mentally the opposition in Formula One. So we'll see how Red Bull goes. Their car launches tomorrow. You can watch that on Sky Sports F1, of course, as well. And also just the other week as well, the Daytona 500 was on. I just want to give you the winner for that event. That was Michael McDowell who won that event as well.
Yes, first victory.
Yeah. What did you make of that, Indy? Just quickly before we finish up with Boris, Zach, what did you make of the Daytona 500?
I think that was quite a last lap, I have to say, Charlie. Joe Logano could have won it, but he got wiped out on that final lap. That's the second week in a row, I have to say, as well, that he could have won that. He could have won a Daytona race, but didn't. Michael McDowell winning his first. This is quite an achievement, can I just say, Charlie? 2 first-time winners in NASCAR in the first 2 races. That's not something that's achieved since the 1900s. Michael McDowell being the first, CJ Bell being the second, yesterday. I think it's a big achievement for NASCAR, and Michael McDowell is certainly the one waiting for a long time, and he made his way up there certainly on the last lap. He was something like 4th position, I think, came into the last lap,
and then
he has so much pace. Yeah, and he has so much pace. He was in the right position, actually, Charlie, to take that lead, but just before the caution came out. So yes, he was very lucky, and he made his way through that field so well.
And also CJ Bell as well, winning the second one, and also the Daytona International Speedway Road Course has added a chicane, basically after turn 4. What do you make of the chicane being added into the road course?
I don't see the need for it. I mean, you don't see, when you watch the Rolex 24, Charlie, you don't see a chicane there. So I don't see why it would have been necessary to add a chicane there. But yeah, not necessary. But I suppose you got to put something. I suppose NASCAR want the fun factor there, so they put it there. Not necessary.
It is an interesting one. So let me see what you think. What do you think about the Daytona International Speedway Road Course? Do you think a chicane should be there at the exit of turn 4? Let me know down in the comments below. Now, though, finally, for the Globetrotter Newscast, we're going to finish with the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, speaking now about his roadmap out of lockdown. Have a listen to this.
Yeah.
That we must always be humble in the face of nature, and we must be cautious. But I really also believe that the vaccination program has dramatically changed the odds in our favour, and it is on that basis that we can now proceed. And of course, Mr. Speaker, there will be others who will believe that we could go faster on the basis of that vaccination program. And I understand their feelings, and I sympathise very much with the exhaustion experiencing and the businesses are experiencing after so long in lockdown. But to them, and to them all, I say that today the end really is in sight, Mr. Speaker. And a wretched year will give way to a spring and a summer that will be very different and incomparably better than the picture we see around us today. And in that spirit, Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Boris Johnson there with the statement. And Zach, what did you make of the statement from the PM today?
Well, what I think, Charlie, was that he's clear it wants to be his last lockdown. I think he seems optimistic that he can get this timetable done, but he's also cautious. And I think he's trying to fight off rebellions from like the COVID research group, who seemed to be a cautious welcome, although it also not as fast as the pace as they would have wanted. There don't seem to be too much complaints. And it looks like this is going to pass through when it goes to a vote anyway, when there is one with Labour's support anyway. So I think, this is what Boris will want. He'll probably get a boost out of this in terms of popularity and maybe in the opinion ratings. But I think he thinks this will be the last one of the loads of lockdowns, and this will be the last time major restrictions will be here, because I think, he needs everyone on his side now. And I think he started a route where he actually is getting people on his side. Now, whether he's able to deliver all the stages, I don't know. Stage 4 seems to be the one I think is going to be a bit
the nightclub stage.
But yeah, considering the fact that, most of the people go there are young, and not all of them will have their vaccine by then. It'll be the end of July at the latest. So I'm not sure. I worry about the infection rate there potentially, but the top 3 certainly seems possible. And it may be that, stage 4 may need to be pushed back a little bit, but stage 3, we may have most of the normality back by May with social distancing, and people's lives would have changed potentially, by then. And we're going to be joining certainly more freedom in the next few months than what we had, a year ago, Charlie. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
it's
100%.
starting to feel a little bit more like the normal now, and starting to move a little bit faster. And it's cautious, but it feels like we're getting there.
It's
It feels like
irreversible as
there's a
well.
tunnel now. Yeah, irreversible. It feels like we're getting to the end of the tunnel a little bit now in that front.
And Zach as well, this is a big thing because obviously with the stages, stage 1 being from the 8th of March, schools returning to like something in stage 2 where you could potentially be going to a gym and obviously the non-essential retail, and from the 29th, rule of 6 and or 2 households can meet outdoors and some outdoor sport courts can reopen like tennis and golf. It's a big move from the government. I mean, do you think stage 1 and stage 2 will be completed? Potentially without any disruption.
I think it could. I mean, they're obviously doing this every 5 weeks, so they need to make sure that the data is going in the right direction, Charlie. That's the main thing. Because if the data's on their side, then yes, we can start move towards the next phase of lifting restrictions. What I don't want them to do is obviously, see them a massive increase in cases where hospitalizations then start chopping up, and then them just going ahead anyway, because that could be a problem. We're not likely to get locked down now. We're going to live with this virus, no doubt about it. Now, there's no zero COVID approach, as the Prime Minister says. So what we need to do is keep cases on a steady level, keep it low, and then gradually lift the restrictions. Because now we're at the case where everyone wants to get out, everyone wants to get about. So the cases are going down, the restrictions are going down, our lives are coming back. Now let's do it in a steady and slow way. Let's not rush this. Let's do this carefully. And then if we do this carefully, whilst we have our restrictions low and the cases low, then we can get life back to normal with the vaccine rolling in.
Yeah. So Keir Starmer mentioned about being cautious, and he supported the PM in the decision to be cautious.
And I should point out we had a little dig at Mark Harper as well, and Steve Baker today as well. I should point out in his statement, he said that the decision should be decided by the Prime Minister, not the member for New Forest or Wickham, for example, which was a direct reference to Steve Baker and Mark Harper.
And so Desmond Swain got mentioned as well, an MP for New Forest.
The New Forest. So clearly, Keir Starmer agrees with the slow approach that the Prime Minister's taken, and not the all-out, I want to get out and I want a restriction to be lifted approach by April. He's not advocating that. Let's just say that, Charlie. And you expect that from the Labour leader.
Yeah, and Zach, schools returning in about a couple of weeks' time. Right move by the government?
2 weeks. Well, yeah. I mean, there's also a concern about cases as well, but you've also got to realise as well, on the other side, that children's education and equality has been suffering. The equality, the people's, there's a lot of issues there that there needs to be a catch up. There needs to be a big catch up for students, no doubt about it, because they've probably been affected worst out of this. They've lost a lot of education, a lot of time. Their futures they're looking ahead to their futures. They're not getting enough out of it.
Face masks, just to let you know,
face masks are compulsory now. Yeah, in the classroom now. So that's what you were going to say. I know predicting what you're going to say there, but I agree with that. I certainly agree with that.
They've updated the advice. This is to make schools safer. We want to keep them open. We don't want to shut them again. We've seen it. January, we thought they were going to open. Then they shut because of, obviously, we had a new variant. So we don't want any new variants escaping the vaccine. So it is very, very important. And also, I'd just like to say, before I wrap this up tonight, to anyone living in the CM13 postcode in Brentwood, I forgot to mention this at the start of the podcast tonight. Please, if you're contacted, get a test, because Zach, there's been some news on the South Africa variant.
It's in Brentwood. There's surge testing going on in there. So basically, everyone's going to be off. If you're in the postcode there, everyone's going to be off for door-to-door testing. So get a test if you need to. If you're asked to get a test, because you don't want that spreading. And
regardless if you have any symptoms at all, regardless if you have any symptoms of coronavirus, please get a test to break the chains of transmission, because the South Africa variant is a variant that can spread very quickly if there's not enough contact tracing. that is going to be done. So we need people, and I urge them, get a test. If you live in the CM13 postcode of Brentwood, we don't want this spreading into Basildon, because I know what happened in Basildon last year. We had a very high infection rate in, say, December. We were at the highest at one point, and it got really, really bad around here when we came out that second national lockdown. So it's vital that people get a test, and if your test is positive, it will go off the genomic sequencing, and it will be, of course, taken, of course, to these laboratories now, genomic sequence it and see if it's the South Africa variant, and they can then clamp down on the contacts and quarantine those individuals who have been in contact. So that is my message to anyone in that postcode. And Zach, what's your message as well to anyone living in the CM13 postcode of Brentwood?
Obviously get a test. Take a test if you have been offered one, because you could get it whilst asymptomatic, or you could even feel symptoms. Just take a test, because it just helps detect where the virus could be and stop it spreading, isolate everyone around who needs to be isolated. So this is very, very crucial there.
And I think as well, Zach, just one more last thing before we wrap this up. We could see more testing happening in the weeks ahead, and vaccinations. Do you think Boris is going to have to go forward with mass testing now if he wants to ease his lockdown?
He's clearly going ahead with the mass testing regime. Looking at it, what he's been announced today, testing is going to play a huge part in a return to normality, and that is crucial as well, because this is going to be needed for bigger events in the future, as well, I think, Charlie. So testing is going to be a huge part going forward.
Yeah. So, yeah, that is very interesting. And that is it for the Globetrotter Newscast tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone has enjoyed tonight. And please, everyone, just remember to keep following the rules, stay home, protect the NHS and save lives. I really want everyone to feel very motivated in a couple of weeks' time that, of course, the schools will reopen. And I hope everyone stays safe whilst we're here. But thank you so much for watching, everyone. Take care. And from me and Zach, it's good night.